All right, guys, so things are just getting messier. The economic war isn't over yet, not by a long shot. As the G7 confiscated Russia's reserves, Putin is now making his own move to isolate Western assets for many years. Even after the war, Western banks are still operating in Russia. This might surprise you, but they're making a ton of money in the country. Just last year, Western banks stuck in Russia paid nearly €1 billion in taxes to the Kremlin. So, in a sense, Russia is also extracting profit from G7 assets. Thanks to the sanctions, Moscow can't access the SWIFT system, and that means no access to payments in dollars and euros to circumvendees, EU banks in Russia. They are a big financial lifeline, so in turn, the banks, they jack up their fees and commissions go through the roof to the moon. Take Raiffeisen Bank, for example. It's a bank from Austria in 2021. Russian profits were less than 600 million AI, but last year this has grown to an incredible 1.8 billion. This is a threefold increase. On the flip side, they also pay a much bigger tax, 464 million EOS, to the Kremlin. Now, of course, the G7 wants the banks to exit Russia, but Putin isn't going to let them go, which shouldn't be a surprise. The West has confiscated 300 billion from Moscow, and this banks they allow Russian entities to transact in Western currencies. RER's bank, or RBI, is trying to exit Russia, taking away 1.5 billion euros in profits. However, that isn't going to happen anytime soon. Russia has frozen the shares of the bank and blocked the sale. The bank is effectively trapped in Russia. Their money and their operations simply can't leave the country. And this is how bad the G7 Russian relations are now. It's just one big TE4A economic war where everyone suffers together. So while Putin builds a new financial system, with the Chinese EU banks are trapped and is business as usual, billions of dollars are stuck in Russia. But more importantly, Western financial architecture is still open to Russian companies, and this is a very big loophole in the G7 financial sanctions. If we look at the data, RBI has 2,600 corporate customers and 4 million local account holders. And these are businesses and people who can buy and sell Western currencies. Companies can still get payments in dollars, and euros. People can still access the SWIFT system. But wasn't the West supposed to cut Russia off completely? We've now sanctioned Russian banks that together hold around $1 trillion in assets. We've cut off Russia's largest bank, a bank that holds more than one-third of Russia's banking assets by itself, cut it off from the U.S. financial system. And today, we're also blocking 4 more major banks. That means every asset they have in America will be frozen. Now, this was back in 2022 when the West first sanctioned the Russian Bing system. It's very clear today that there are still avenues for Russia to trade with the world. They're actively transacting with China, using the RFB and the ruble to settle their trades. Around 90% is done outside the dollar, and Beijing is Russia's biggest trading partner. But here's the big question. Why doesn't the EU cut away Russia completely from the banking system? Now the answer is very simple, because Europe still needs Russian gas. In May this year, Russia surpassed the US as the biggest supplier of natural gas to Europe. Once again, it's a clear rebuke to all the sanctions, and price really matters. We are seeing EU industry start to shatter. Even Volkswagen is on the verge of closing down their plants in Germany. That's a historic move, and not in a good way. Even today, Europe is importing a significant amount of Russian gas. Majority of Russian gas in Europe comes from 3 main sources: Lurgy imports to the Turk Stream pipeline, and the Ukraine transit pipeline. Volumes from these 3 pipelines haven't really changed in Q2 this year. The EU bought over 12 billion cubic meters of Russian gas for their economy from just these 3 sources. And obviously, Europe has to find a way to pay for it. It's a big reason why EU banks are still operating in Russia. They are paying for the gas with Western currencies like the euro. There's significant pressure from the US to close the banks down for sure. But if they do, Europe will have big payment issues. They'll be forced to pay in rubles, or God forbid, to the Chinese RMB, and that only benefits Moscow or Beijing. So the EU banks are caught in a real twist in a bind, and even if they wanted to leave, Russia doesn't allow them to. Beyond that, there's even more money stuck in Russia. Billions of dollars in Western profits are trapped in the country. Around $8 billion of earnings could be frozen or immobilized. Russia has lost the national reserves, and they're very pissed. They could always retaliate against Western companies on Russian soil. In May this year, is estimated that over 2,000 foreign businesses have remained in Russia. Less than 400 exited the country, and those that left, they paid high price to do so. Let's not forget Russia imposes a big exit tax to leave. Now, can this match the 300 billion seizure from the G7? Maybe yes, maybe no, but a lot of companies are on a hook in the months and years to come. Now, this nightmare gets even worse, and we are, of course, talking about the US dollar. Everyone knows the dollar is the world reserve currency. The majority of transactions are done with it, well over 80 or even 90% in some areas of the world. But big cracks are forming, especially when it comes to being a reserve asset since the '08 crisis countries around the world. They holding fewer treasury bonds, years has gone from over 55% to almost under 30%, which is horrendous news for the US government. Remember how the US economy actually functions? This is a debt-based economy that needs to borrow money just to survive. And if countries continue to shine US debt, it really opens up a whole kind of worms for the world's biggest economy. So when demand for the bonds goes down, the yields have to stay high, and that jacks up the cost of just maintaining the debt. Now, this chart is truly horrifying. This is the true Halloween story. Us interest payments have reached over $1 trillion into 2023. There's this big vertical lineup immediately after the 2020 lockdowns. Now, part of it was the crazy stimulus money. Another is the borrowing of money to pop up the US economy. If the world does move away from the dollar, the national debt will fly to the moon. Interest payments would hit 2 trillion or even 3 trillion by the end of the decade. And a big shout out to our sponsor today, Indigo Precious Metals. When it comes to buying gold and silver, I try Indigo Precious Metals in Singapore. They have made investing in precious metals safe, fast, easy, and simple for both small and large-scale buying. I've been stacking gold for over a decade now, and I've learned two things when buying. You want to buy authentic gold bullion, and you want to buy it at the lowest premium possible to stretch your dollars even further. And I'm glad to say I found both of this at Indigo Precious Metals. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world today. We have geopolitics, I see chaos, and the values of fat currencies getting debased. Inflation is not going to end. And that's why I consistently buy gold to preserve my wealth. Indigo Precious Metals is a leading retailer in Singapore. They specialize in physical gold, silver, and platinum. They are my one-stop shop. When it comes to buying bullion, their prices are sharp, and they have the best brands on sale, and I can test the gold on the spot. So if you're looking to make your first goal, purchase Indigo Precious Metals is the best place to start. Where is 10 or 1 kilo? This is the reputable dealer you are looking for, so take action today. Click on the link below and enjoy a discount on your first purchase with the code SHANFU. Start your goal stacking journey today. So there's a profound urgency from the US government to preserve the status of the US dollar, because the borrowing from the US is not going to end, is a big reason why Fitch downgraded America's credit score in the first place. The only option that really leaves our economy in good shape is in our financial system is raising the debt ceiling and making clear that Congress stands behind the basic principle that America pays its bills. We're not a deadbeat country. And if that's compromised, even in the run-up to it, if it looks like we're going to go up against the ceiling and may not get it done, that will have tremendously adverse effects on financial markets in the economy. Yellen basically gave away the playbook here. The borrowing must continue, and to preserve this status, anything and everything can be done. And now we have a very disturbing update from candidate Trump. If he's elected, he would punish the world for going against the dollar. Donald Trump is pledging a 100% tariff on countries that shine the dollar. The dollar is under major siege, and he wants to flip the script now. This is definitely not a good idea. Many of Trump's policies make some sense for the US, but when it comes to trade tariffs, our countries, and this dollar issue, he's really off base here. It's important to take this seriously because Trump is leading in the polls, and more likely than not, a global trade war could be coming very soon. In 2025, the US could start penalizing countries that stop using the dollar. They could impose a 100% tariff on goods coming into the US consumer market. In addition, we could see export controls and currency manipulation charges as well. So if a country XYZ trades using the euro, the yuan, or the rupee instead of the dollar, they could be whacked financially. Now, if you ever wanted a great decoupling event, this would be it. It's weaponized in the dollar and the US consumer market taking it to the next level. Now let's consider the state of Russia and China. These two countries, they are completely theorized. Will the US slap them with a currency manipulation tax? And how much will that be? What about the Middle East? What about Asia? Will the government go after them as well? Will they get punished as well? This won't end well for the US either. The US runs a huge trade deficit with the world, which means they import in a lot more than what they sell out. The TX Foundation estimated the combined damage of imposing the Trump tariffs, and this is just the impact of a 10% tariff on global imports and 60% on Chinese products. The US would lose almost a full percentage point of GDP. In addition, almost 700,000 jobs would be destroyed. In other words, a complete disaster. Inflation will fly to the moon, and other countries will also retaliate with their own tariffs on US exports. Trump's dollar plan is really outlandish here. Once you force the world to use the dollar with a big stick to whack them, you'll just turn into the mafia. Countries would infect the doughs even further. No one really likes being threatened. More bilateral trade will happen, and fewer dollars will be recycled back into US treasuries. And here's why: when it comes to economic growth, the global south of BRICS will win in 2024. The US is estimated to grow at just 2.7%. And that's despite the endless deficit spending. India, China, and the rest of BRICS will do much better than the G7. And all of these countries would much rather use their own currencies. It won't be a loss to abandon the US dollar for bilateral trade. So if America punishes countries for not using the dollar, they will simply do business elsewhere. They would buy and sell more within the BRICS bloc. BRICS will still be able to sell to the US. Let's be clear about that. They just sell all their products to the middleman countries like Mexico and then reject prices higher for us consumers. This is desperate. This is crazy. And it will only boomerang back on the economy. Inflation was skyrocket, the deficit will explode, and people's standard of living, especially in the US, will literally collapse. And if countries choose to avoid the dollar, just think about this now. Now they also won't be buying us bonds as a reserve asset. So this plan isn't good. I really hope that Trump is just posturing, because if he isn't, and that will be the day the dollar dies. But let me know what you think. Will Russia freeze and seize even more assets? And will the US really punish countries that shine the dollar? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through this crazy times.